Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Clara Edwards lived in a world built on appearances. From the outside, her marriage to Ethan Edwards, the charming and eloquent CEO of Edwards Holdings, appeared enviable. Their townhouse in Kensington gleamed with wealth, their lives draped in luxury and social grace. Yet beneath that sheen was a world of disdain and quiet humiliation. Ethan spoke to her like she was furniture, useful only for decoration and domestic routine. His mistress, Sophie Lane, the company's ambitious executive assistant, mirrored his cruelty with subtle, venomous remarks about Clara's limited education. They often laughed over dinner, pretending their mockery was light humor, but Clara knew the scorn ran deep. To them, she was a woman who couldn't hold a conversation about stocks or mergers, an ornament, not a mind. But what Ethan and Sophie didn't realize was that Clara's silence wasn't ignorance, it was strategy. Years ago, while they underestimated her, she had quietly enrolled in evening classes, studying finance, law, and management. Her nights were spent reading under dim lights, while Ethan snored beside her. She understood every insult, every business term, every betrayal, and she was taking notes. In their arrogance, they handed her the keys to their empire, believing she would never know how to use them. But she did, and she was waiting. The gala at the Royal Thames Hotel was supposed to be Ethan's night. Investors, board members, and journalists filled the room with champagne and chatter. Clara, dressed in a simple navy gown, accompanied him quietly. Sophie, radiant in red, stayed close to Ethan's side as though she were his rightful partner. "Oh, Clara, I hope you're not too bored by all these business talks," Sophie said, her tone sugar-coated but cruel. "Numbers can be confusing, can't they?" The table laughed lightly, and Ethan added, "She's not the boardroom type. My wife is more traditional." Clara smiled faintly, hiding the storm behind her calm eyes. When the laughter faded, Clara excused herself and stood by the window, looking over the city that once terrified her. London's skyline glittered with opportunity and revenge. She recalled her private meetings with Mr. Harold Bennett, her discreet lawyer, who had recently finalized her hidden acquisition of company shares. They had laughed at her ignorance, not realizing she was quietly becoming the biggest investor behind their empire. Tonight, while they celebrated their arrogance, she was already rewriting the story one signature at a time. Every toast to Ethan's success only brought her closer to the moment when the truth would burn brighter than the chandeliers above them. It had begun 2 years earlier. Clara had met Helena Brooks, a retired financial consultant, and once one of London's most respected women in banking. Clara had found her through an online business forum under pseudonym, Sea Learner. Helena became her guide, teaching her the art of investments, company structures, and the language of money. "Knowledge is acquired as revenge," Helena would say, her eyes sharp as glass. Clara absorbed every word. She didn't just learn finance. She learned power, how it moved, how it was disguised, and how it could be taken back silently. Helena had advised her to create separate trusts, using them to purchase shares of Edwards Holdings through discreet intermediaries. Clara followed her counsel religiously. Month after month, small ownership stakes accumulated in her name, masked behind offshore subsidiaries. Ethan never noticed, too busy chasing Sophie and parading his intellect at conferences. When Helena passed away, she left Clara one final message. Never warn them. Let them see the fire only when they are standing in the smoke. That phrase became Clara's mantra. It echoed in her every move, her every calm smile. The woman they called illiterate was now learning how to own their entire world. Sophie Lane was more than Ethan's mistress. She was his mirror, elegant, cunning, and greedy. She believed she could manipulate him into handing her full control of Edwards Holdings. She had started whispering into his ear, planning ideas about merging with international firms, claiming Clara would only embarrass him in elite circles. Together, they devised plans that would push Clara further out of the picture. Ethan began refusing to take Clara to board events, citing that she would say something silly. Sophie ensured the gossip spread among employees, that Mrs. Edwards couldn't even read a balance sheet. Clara endured every humiliation in silence. Each whisper only sharpened her resolve. She let them build their illusions, even allowing Sophie to access confidential files, knowing her greed would soon betray her. Clara's patience was weaponized intelligence. When Sophie secretly redirected funds to a private account in Geneva, Clara already had the digital trail copied and stored. When Ethan signed forged documents, she let him and forwarded them straight to her lawyer. Sophie believed she was winning, that she'd soon be Ethan's legitimate partner. But Clara was 2 steps ahead, turning every insult into evidence, every betrayal into leverage. At home, Clara maintained her facade perfectly. Ethan's disdain had become routine, his affection long gone. She had transformed her pain into precision, scheduling, learning, and documenting everything. Late at night, she worked from her study, updating files and drafting reports. When Ethan once mocked her for staring at numbers she couldn't read, she simply smiled and nodded. She didn't need to correct him. Every file she opened, every transaction she analyzed, was another thread connecting him and Sophie's fraud. One evening, as rain hit the windows, Clara received an encrypted message from Mr. Bennet. The acquisition was complete. She now held 51% of the company through hidden proxies. For the first time, she allowed herself a quiet smile. Years of mockery had built this empire, her empire. Ethan had spent millions on parties and affairs, while Clara had spent her time building an invisible fortress of power. The quiet storm was gathering. She closed her laptop, whispered, "Thank you," to the night, and prepared for the next phase. The time for silence was almost over. Ethan's empire began to falter in subtle ways. A delayed shipment, a canceled contract, a restless investor. Small tremors that hinted at an unseen force. Sophie panicked, demanding meetings and blaming everyone but herself. "Something's off," she hissed to Ethan in his office. "Someone's pulling strings." Ethan, arrogant as ever, dismissed the concerns. "No one can touch us," he sneered. "I run this company." But beneath his bravado, the foundation was shifting. Clara watched from the background, her expression unreadable. Her lawyer had already initiated discreet audits, which revealed shocking discrepancies. Ethan and Sophie had bled the company through fraudulent expenditures, and now the numbers were unraveling. Investors were whispering. The media was sniffing. Clara didn't interfere, not yet. She wanted Ethan to feel the weight of uncertainty, the same way he'd made her feel small and irrelevant. Every time Sophie called her clueless, Clara thought, "You'll know soon who truly understands numbers." The empire that once looked invincible was crumbling, and its cracks were her silent fingerprints. An anonymous shareholder suddenly emerged, blocking a crucial international merger Ethan had been planning for months. The news hit him like a storm. "Who the hell is this?" he shouted during a board meeting. Sophie tried to calm him, but the directors were already restless. No one had seen the mysterious owner, yet their signature carried more power than Ethan's. Every move he made required that shareholders' consent. "Find out who it is," he barked at Sophie, slamming his fist on the table. Meanwhile, Clara sat quietly in her private office downtown, watching the chaos unfold through confidential reports sent by Mr. Bennet. The anonymous shareholder was her, but she wasn't ready to reveal herself yet. She was a ghost in their system, the power they couldn't name. Every call Ethan made, every attempt to trace her, led to dead ends. He was losing control of his company, and with it, his sanity. For Clara, it was poetic justice, watching him chase a shadow he created with his own arrogance. Sophie's once confident demeanor began to crack. She grew paranoid, fearing exposure. She blamed Ethan for not protecting her, while Ethan blamed her for every bad decision. Their alliance began to rot from within. They argued in his office, unaware that their conversations were being quietly recorded by Clara's team. "You said she's useless," Sophie yelled. "If she's useless, then why is everything falling apart?" Ethan grabbed a glass and hurled it against the wall. "Because someone's playing us." Clara reviewed the footage from her laptop that night, her calm expression betraying no emotion. It wasn't joy she felt, it was justice. For years she'd endured humiliation. Now they were enduring fear. The empire they had built on mockery was devouring itself. Even the staff began whispering, noticing Sophie's tears and Ethan's temper. What once looked like perfection was dissolving into panic. Clara made sure every step of their collapse was documented. There would be no escape, no denial, no rewriting of the truth. Their downfall would be undeniable and public. The board demanded an emergency meeting. Investors were threatening to pull out, and international partners were losing confidence. Ethan arrived at the boardroom red-eyed and disheveled, with Sophie close behind. "We will fix this," he announced, but his voice lacked conviction. The directors exchanged skeptical glances. Rumors had already spread that an unseen owner had control. Perhaps, one director suggested, we should invite the majority shareholder to clarify things. Ethan forced a smile. I'll handle that, he lied. At home, Clara received the official notice. She was required to attend as a controlling stakeholder. She stared at the letter, her hands trembling slightly. The time had come. Years of silence had led to this single moment. She looked around her quiet study, filled with notes and memories of long nights spent learning, planning, enduring. You call me illiterate, she whispered to herself. Let's see how you handle this literacy. As the rain began to pour outside, Clara packed her documents and prepared to face them, not as Ethan's wife, but as their CEO. The morning of a meeting dawned gray and cold. Ethan stood at the head of the long glass table, visibly agitated. Sophie fidgeted beside him, pretending confidence. The room buzzed with tension. Then the doors opened. Every head turned as Clara Edwards entered, dressed in an elegant white suit, exuding quiet authority. For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Ethan blinked in disbelief. Clara, what are you doing here? He stammered. She smiled gently. Attended my company's board meeting, of course. Gasps filled the room as Clara calmly walked to the head seat and placed a thick folder on the table. She handed copies to each board member. Inside, she said softly, our document confirming the new ownership structure of Edward Holdings. Ethan's face drained of color as he flipped through the pages. There, in black and white, were the signatures and filings showing that Clara Edwards was now the majority shareholder and CEO. Sophie's jaw dropped. This can't be real, she whispered. Clara looked at her calmly and replied, It's very real, and it's been real for quite some time. For a long moment, the room remained frozen in disbelief. Ethan stood motionless, his hands trembling as he flipped through page after page of Clara's documents. This is impossible, he muttered, his voice cracking under the weight of humiliation. Sophie tried to snatch the papers from him, but Clara's calm voice cut through the tension. You laughed at me for not understanding business, she said softly. But while you mocked me, I was learning everything you never thought I could. The board members exchanged glances, realization dawning in their eyes. Clara wasn't the quiet, ignorant wife they believed she was. She was the mind that had been silently controlling the company's survival. Ethan tried to regain his composure. This is fraud. You tricked me, he shouted, slamming his fist against the table. Clara didn't flinch. She reached into her briefcase and produced a USB drive. Everything on this drive proves your misuse of company funds and your mistress's involvement. She placed it before the directors, who quickly signaled for the legal team. The tension was palpable. Clara stood, straightened her suit, and said, This meeting is adjourned. The new management will contact you shortly. And with that, she walked out, her heels echoing like a royal decree of justice fulfilled. Ethan's empire crumbled overnight. News of the boardroom confrontation spread across London's corporate circles like wildfire. Investors began withdrawing. Shareholders demanded accountability, and journalists dug up years of hidden misdeeds. Ethan's once charismatic face was plastered on headlines. CEO ousted by wife in stunning corporate coup. Sophie hid from the media, deleting her social accounts and avoiding calls from the press. The empire they built on lies was collapsing, brick by brick, and there was no saving it. At home, Ethan paced like a caged animal. You've destroyed everything, he yelled when Clara came to collect her belongings. She looked at him with the same calmness that once made him think she was weak. No, she said quietly. You destroyed it yourself. I only revealed the truth. His anger faltered for a moment, giving way to fear. Clara turned to leave, her voice steady as stone. You thought knowledge made you superior, but arrogance blinded you to the simplest lesson. Underestimating people always costs more than ignorance. Sophie's world turned to ash. With her name exposed in the financial audit, she became the target of investigations. Reporters camped outside her apartment, shouting questions about forged signatures and missing funds. She tried calling Ethan, but he had blocked her number. Alone and terrified, she began sending desperate emails to Clara, begging for mercy. Please, I didn't mean to hurt you, she wrote. I just wanted a better life. But Clara didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. In her panic, Sophie attempted to flee the country using fake travel documents, but the authorities were already watching. She was arrested at Heathrow Airport with fraudulent financial records in her luggage. The same vanity that once fueled her cruelty now became her downfall. The headlines the next morning were merciless. CEO's mistress arrested in embezzlement scandal. Clara didn't celebrate the news. She simply sighed, knowing justice had taken its course. Her silence had spoken louder than vengeance ever could. Ethan's trial became the most publicized corporate scandal in London that year. The courtroom buzzed with journalists and spectators hungry for drama. As the prosecution unveiled evidence of money laundering and contract fraud, Ethan sat stone-faced, his arrogance replaced with defeat. Clara attended only one session. The day the verdict was read. She wore a black suit, elegant and unyielding, her presence commanding quiet respect. The judge declared Ethan guilty on multiple counts, sentencing him to several years in prison and heavy restitution. When the session ended, Ethan turned toward her. His eyes were hollow, filled with regret and disbelief. "Why, Clara?" he whispered as guards led him away. She looked at him one last time and replied, "Because you taught me never to underestimate silence." The courtroom fell silent as she turned and walked out, her heels echoing the end of an era. Justice had been served not with rage, but with intelligence and restraint. The following weeks transformed Clara into a symbol of empowerment. Magazines praised her as a silent CEO who outsmarted the titans. Invitations poured in from global firms, seeking her insight on leadership and resilience. Yet, despite her newfound fame, Clara remained grounded. Her first act as CEO was to reform Edwards Holdings into a transparent, ethical organization. She rehired staff who had been dismissed unfairly and created scholarship funds for women in business, ensuring that others like her would never be mocked for lacking opportunity. Walking to the company lobby one morning, Clara paused before a portrait of Ethan that still hung on the wall. For a moment, she considered removing it, but then she smiled faintly. "Let it stay," she told the maintenance team. "It's a reminder that arrogance has no lasting place in leadership." The staff applauded softly, understanding the quiet grace of her decision. Clara had reclaimed her throne not by crushing others, but by elevating what remained into something better. Among the people who reached out to her after her victory was a man named Daniel Pierce, a prominent venture capitalist who had once been a rival of Ethan's. "I watched your story unfold," he said during their meeting at the Shard. "It takes remarkable intellect and courage to do what you did." Clara smiled politely, wary of flattery but intrigued by his sincerity. Daniel proposed a partnership to expand the company's international reach under her leadership. "You don't just need investors," he said. "You need visionaries who believe in women like you." Over the following months, Daniel became both a business partner and a quiet friend. Unlike Ethan, he never questioned Clara's intelligence or background. He admired her not for her beauty or title, but for her resilience and foresight. Their conversations, filled with wit and shared ambition, reminded her that trust didn't have to be a weakness. It could be rebuilt with the right person. Slowly, Clara began to rediscover not just power, but peace. Clara's success didn't erase the years of emotional wounds, but gave her a new purpose. She began visiting local literacy centers and sponsoring adult education programs for women who had been told they were too old to learn. Each time she met a woman struggling to read, she saw a reflection of her past, the quiet fear, the doubt, the shame. She spoke to them with warmth. "Your mind is your greatest asset. Never let anyone make you feel less because of what you don't know. It's only temporary." Her foundation, the Helena Initiative, named after her late mentor, grew rapidly. It provided grants, mentorship, and safe learning environments for women across the UK and beyond. The press called her the educator in heels. But to Clara, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about legacy. She was turning her pain into a pathway for others. The humiliation that once broke her had become the bridge that lifted hundreds of others towards self-worth. From prison, Ethan wrote letters, dozens of them. At first, they were filled with denial and bitterness. But over time, they changed. He admitted his arrogance, his blindness, and his envy of Clara's intelligence. One letter read, "You were the better CEO all along. I just didn't have the humility to see it." Clara read each one silently, then placed them in a box without responding. Forgiveness, she believed, was not something to be performed. It was something to be lived. Sophie, too, reached out from rehabilitation, having been released on parole. "I envy your strength," she wrote. "If I had seen you as an ally instead of an enemy, maybe we both could have grown." Clara forwarded the message to her foundation's director. If she truly wants redemption, she said, give her a chance to teach financial ethics to our students. Let her turn her mistakes into lessons. It was the ultimate power move, not revenge, but grace. Under Clara's leadership, Edwards Holdings rebranded as Edwards Global Innovations, becoming a top-performing company across Europe and Africa. Her balanced leadership style, combining intellect, empathy, and accountability, transformed the corporate culture. Employees who once feared management now work with pride and purpose. She launched mentorship programs that turned cleaners into executives and interns into entrepreneurs. The company became known not just for its profit, but for its humanity. At a grand press event, Clara stood at the podium overlooking London skyline. Cameras flashed as she announced the firm's latest milestone, a £1 billion sustainability project in Africa. This isn't just about business, she said, her voice steady and powerful. It's about rewriting the story of who gets to lead and how they lead. The audience erupted in applause. Clara smiled softly, realizing that her once mocked silence had become her legacy's loudest echo. Years later, Clara sat in her garden, sipping tea as the morning sun painted the city in gold. Her granddaughter ran up to her with a business magazine in hand. "Grandma," the girl said proudly, "they wrote about you again, the woman who led with grace." Clara chuckled. "Grace outlasts power, darling. Remember that." The little girl smiled and hugged her tightly, unaware of the battles her grandmother had fought in silence. As the wind brushed through the roses, Clara reflected on her journey, from a mocked wife to a global leader. She didn't just win back a company. She won back her dignity, her voice, and her purpose. In the end, she realized that silence had never been weakness. It was strategy, discipline, and strength disguised as humility. Her story became a timeless lesson whispered in corporate halls. Never mistake quietness for ignorance. Sometimes, the quiet ones are already building empires. That's the end of the story. What did you learn about the story? Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Thanks for watching.